Ladies and gentlemen, CSAC First Vice President LETICIA PEREZ.
Woohoo! Well, I can feel the excitement in the room for me, so thank you. This is exciting. We've saved the best for last, as usual, which is good. No, I'm kidding. Thank you for your patience. I'm going to avoid reading a lot of this and let folks sort of share a little bit about their expertise so that we can get moving on, given where we are in the schedule. So we have LLEWELLYN Cox, welcome. We have ARMAN NADERSHAHI, correct? Yeah. And also Keith Hoffman, VP of Business Development and Technology with LA Biomed. LLEWELLYN Cox, co-founder and CEO of BIOBUILT. ARMAN, Senior Director, Corporate and Intellectual Property Counsel at the Alfred E. Mann Institute of Biomedical Engineering at USC. No offense, MRT, where are you? Okay. Excellent. He's not here. Missed that part. So, gentlemen, welcome. I want to get right into the panel. We are a bit behind, so let's get right to it. And could you give us a sense about what you do, why we should care, and why you're here today? So, the floor is yours. ARMAN, please.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, so, we've heard a couple times earlier today about the proverbial valley of death where, how do you get early stage innovation, technologies, inventions out into the marketplace, issues with funding and personnel, expertise. So the Alfred Mann Institute at USC is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. We're formally affiliated with USC from a generous gift from the late Alfred Mann of the endowment is $180 million. And we invest between $8 to $9 million a year in basically innovating and incubating new technologies that we find at USC. So rather than conventional technology transfer where there's a lot of, kind of licensing and that type of thing, we actually invest into building startup companies, doing clinical trials, building prototypes, and then getting funding for the startup companies or looking for licensees. So we really end up we've had a whole kind of portfolio approach to doing this. So we've done just quick licenses in some cases. Another one of our spin-out companies, we did mergers and acquisitions and then got a public listing on NASDAQ. We've done deals with startup companies in Greece, in China. So it's a really global operation.
What should county supervisors think about the work you do?
I think what it does is it highlights the need to really address that kind of valley of death, right? So there's so much good, there's excellent universities in LA County, really well funded, a lot of good research happening, but there's a bottleneck. I mean, that's why Alfred Mann gave the initial $150 million gift, is that he wanted to accelerate that process and really bring the academicians and the industry experts together. So create, to the earlier point, kind of an ecosystem approach. So we're kind of creating a microcosm or a smaller version of that ecosystem between industry and the academic setting. But I think, it may serve as a bit of a model or an example for what we can do on a city or county-wide scale.
Okay. Wow. That is interesting. I'll be back with you in a moment. Thank you. That excellent articulation of the issues. Valley of Death, that is a phrase that should give us all pause for concern, right, about how we think about this kind of innovation, how we're promoting the role we play as government actors with all of our various levels of expertise and leverage, right? That's a fascinating dilemma. LLEWELLYN Cox. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to be here. So I apologize for confusing people. I have a lot of jobs. I'm like the Ryan Seacrest of biotech. I'm currently CEO and co-founder of BIOBUILT, which is an accelerator program that is helping early stage companies get themselves to a level where they are fundable. I can talk about that a little bit later, but I think the reason I was brought here was to talk about my previous business, which is called Lab Launch, of which I am still the chair. I'm still involved. I founded in 2014 out of personal frustration. I'm a bioscientist by training. After a long and extraordinarily weird journey, I found myself in the world of entrepreneurship. And I found it very, very frustrating trying to do some of this work in Los Angeles. I love living here. I don't want to leave. I certainly don't want to go to the Bay. All due respect, if I wanted to be somewhere cold and wet, I'd have stayed in England. But it was very, very difficult. And there were a very few possibilities real estate-wise to start early-stage companies in the LA area. You've heard about some of the things that are going on at LA Biomed and elsewhere to correct that, but back in 2014, it was a real problem. So we founded Lab Launch, myself and a couple of people, on a wing and a prayer. I sold my car to finance a nonprofit, so you have to be kind of crazy to be an entrepreneur. And we basically just went ahead and did it. We built a biolab. So we were lucky to find a landlord who bought into our vision of building more bioscience in LA, and the idea that, you know, it's not a case of if we build it, they will come. It's more of a case in Los Angeles of if we build it, they'll actually stay because we like being here. So 3 years later, we have a space in Monrovia. It's an 11,000 square foot office and lab shared facility. I think the easiest way to describe Lab Launch is it's like WeWork for biotech. So young companies come in, we assign them a certain amount of bench space in a shared lab. And the real value, I think, that gets very understated is it's a full service environment. It's, obviously, you've heard this phrase, valley of death, many times. And part of the reason for that, other than the expense and the difficulty of simply commercializing a high-tech invention, is there's an awful lot to learn beyond what you know technically from your university education. You have to learn how to run a business. You have to learn how to switch from an academic discovery paradigm to an industrial R&D paradigm, which is very different. Those two things are very hard in and of themselves. The last thing you need to be doing is then layering on top of that, having to learn about operations and human resources and OSHA and compliance. So within the realms of legality, basically what Lab Launch does is we provide a full service lab that provides as much of that operational support as we can. So when people live at Lab Launch, their trash is taken out, their biomedical waste is disposed of properly, their chemicals are tracked in and out, and the waste is disposed of properly. Wow. Internet and HR, and everything is bundled into all of that. So I handed over control of Lab Launch to a wonderful young scientist called Marie Rippon earlier this year. She is a phenomenal person. She's a tireless advocate for getting more women to the STEM fields. She's a graduate of USC, so she's, like myself, very committed to improving the Los Angeles area.
And clearly brilliant, if she's like you.
She's much more brilliant than me. And with all honesty, the success of Lab Launch is 5% what I thought would be a good idea and 95% Marie being smart. And we are expanding. We see, I think was alluded to in the last panel, every city is a little bit different. Every region is a little bit different. And Los Angeles has a sprawling geography. And so we work with that rather than against it. So the goal with Lab Launch is to create a network of spaces across Los Angeles. So whether you're in the San Gabriel Valley at City of Hope, or you're up in the San Fernando Valley at Cal State Northridge, or you're down in the West Side by UCLA, you should be close to a lab where you can take your incipient company, start your R&D program, get the proofs of concepts you want without bankrupting yourself, so you can get to a stage where you can really attract, good quality investors to take your company to the next level.
Do you have a car now?
I do have a car now. I'm very fortunate to be married to an extremely talented person. So I think this is the best advertisement for why it's important to have a diverse workforce. Is everything in my life is due to the fact I'm surrounded by very capable, smart women.
I like you. A lot. So has the environment changed from when you needed to sell your car to where we are now? And if not, are we moving in the trajectory, and will we be there in 2050? What does that look like?
Absolutely. You know, this is what keeps me going every day. You know, like any other business, Lab Launch has been through near-death experiences and huge highs when we finally got to some successes. The environment, the ecosystem that was referred to from 5 or so years ago when I started out on this entrepreneurial journey to where it is now is night and day. Los Angeles is a completely different place than it was 5 years ago.
That's because of MRT.
And in many ways, thanks to MRT. And it's thanks to this ecosystem that is developing, thanks to folks like LA Biomed, thanks to Biocom, thanks to all of these groups coming together and addressing one area where they say, here's a gap in knowledge or expertise or support, and we have a solution to that bit, and fitting into the ecosystem. And as these groups have come together and grown and keep working together, that's how we create an ecosystem that will truly succeed. And long may it continue. It's gone from somewhere here to somewhere here, and our trajectory is nowhere but up, and I'm excited to see it continue.
You seem to love what you do.
You can't do this if you don't love it. You go crazy. Or maybe I went crazy and this is just how I express being.
Well, there it is. Very good. Thank you. We'll be back with you. Keith Hoffman, VP Business Development and Technology with LA Biomed. You have listened to the conversation evolve today. The questions being posed by folks in the electoral sector as well as government bureaucrats. What would you like this group to know about what you've heard today based on your expertise, and what can you help us understand as non-experts about your really complicated, fascinating, and crazy world?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And thank you, Supervisor Ridley-Thomas, for having David and I come here today. We really appreciate it. I think that I'll just give a little bit of on my background, because it definitely colors the way that I look at the situation up here and the situation that LA is in. So I was born and raised in San Diego. Then I got my undergrad and graduate degrees in Irvine. Now I'm in Los Angeles. I'm not going to go any further north. I want to stay right here. So back in '97, I got my PhD in neuropharmacology at Irvine, and I immediately went into industry. So I've been involved in probably a dozen different startups on the C level, VP level, and as a consultant, sometimes a chairman, et cetera. So I've seen good and bad, the ugly of startups, and most of what I've done has been in the bioscience space, but I've also done some retail and some other adventures. Basically, one of the main things that my career has been about is taking technology from universities and trying to turn them into companies and successful products, et cetera. One of the lessons you really learn along this path is that inventors, by and large, especially if they're from universities or from an institute like LA Biomed, et cetera, they are incredibly brilliant at what they do. They therefore believe that they also should be able to do this easy business thing very simply, right? So it's something that LLEWELLYN touched upon as well. And you see that every single time. You don't see it once, you see it every single time. So one of the things that's a challenge in bioscience is being able to, and I think it's unlike other industries where it's the timeline to get a product's much quicker, it's just a lot more logical, you don't have to have as much money, et cetera. Bioscience is tough, but as David Meyer mentioned, Indari, some of these approvals, some of the things that have changed everyone's life in this room, those all come from this process. So it's hard, but it's incredibly rewarding. What you have to do is you have to figure out how to balance these amazingly smart innovators and slowly, gently try to teach them how to either let business people come in and help guide them and make a successful company, or in fact provide them with the training and the mentoring that will make them understand that business is not just some simple thing, and because they're a brilliant cardiologist, they should be able to be the CEO of a company, et cetera. So I think that's one of the things that's sort of defined my career is trying to figure out how to make that happen. And
soft skills for scientists.
Exactly. And
so
that's what we're really trying to do at LA Biomed as well. We have an incredible pool of talent, incredible pool of innovations that come out. We have a long history of these products and approvals and all that, but we haven't been systematically trying to train our own investigators to either understand that they need to step aside to let business people come in, or teach them at least how to be one.
Or see value in that methodology,
Exactly.
right? That is
Yeah.
so different than what
Right.
this life-saving creativity that you're doing.
Yeah, so I think that's, that's one of the big things to keep in mind if you want to get your counties and everything into bioscience, is that there is that education piece that is really needed for innovators. And then, what Arman talked about, I mean, that would be a dream if all of our institutes and universities could have a system like that where we could actually then directly put our own money in to try to take these things to the next level, like they do at Lab Launch, like they do in places like this, to basically give the infrastructure, give the training, and then help these companies do M&A deals, do mergers, do this and that. Those are the type of things that require the money. And so the big missing piece in LA County right now is, of course, major venture capital for bioscience and, getting more family offices involved in funding bioscience. But I think once we get the infrastructure in place for some of these things, those things will flow naturally. So I think that's sort of where we are. And I think everyone's approaching it in the right way. We're just approaching it in different locations. And I think we can all come together and make it work.
The electeds are uniquely situated and well-developed in the area of fundraising as a matter of capacity and survival, as you know. It seems like an interesting marriage between a need of your world and a sort of natural constituency of politicians, if you will. Do you see anything there? Is there movement there? How could we be meaningful in the world of connecting you with money players that are interested in wielding influence, frankly, but also may have an eye on this kind of evolution? Anybody?
I think, one example that I'll give is that it's been talked about here earlier, is that the sort of the vision of Supervisor Ridley-Thomas and some of the other supervisors to actually, there's tangible evidence of this at the LA Biomed campus. They've given us $3 million, as David mentioned, to build out the incubator. The tech park is obviously going to be on their land that we'll lease from them, et cetera. So those are tangible things that counties can do to help to grow these companies. And once you have that infrastructure, then it makes it a lot easier for the venture capitalists and the money to come, because they realize you've actually put the infrastructure and the effort behind those companies to make them successful. Now you just need the money.
Gentlemen?
Yeah, this is a kind of an issue that we're kind of dealing with BioBuilt right now. Is we're trying to figure out a way to help young companies develop themselves and find capital to go to the next level. The question that we've been racking with in Los Angeles County is we have an awful lot of wealth. And we actually have really, really good support from the philanthropic world for biosciences. You've seen this from, all of the major universities, and LA Biomed have, 7 or 8 figure donors. There's quite a few of those folks in the LA area. What we're struggling is how we can leverage this base of ultra wealthy folks who like to support bioscience into liking to support bioscience and make money, which you would think would be very easy, but actually is a little bit more tricky. So there's a lot of things we can do, and I think one of the areas where folks like electeds who are very, very familiar with the philanthropic community and their needs, their interests, their psychology, frankly, is working with these folks to support endeavors like ours, like LA Biomed's, but also work on some of these concepts that we're starting to see to come to the fore, things like philanthropic investment, or impact investing sometimes as it's called, where you have this kind of meld of philanthropic giving and investment, where something is structured as an investment, but they're not really expecting a return. We see that as kind of the way to start bringing people into this investing mode is to give them a little bit of exposure to the opportunities, and furthermore, it's speaking to their hearts and to their wallets. I think bioscience, because we have the strong background in medical technologies, we're great at speaking to the heart. When commercialization comes into it, we need to speak to people's wallets. And that's a slightly different and trickier conversation, but I think that's an area where we can work with the public and private sectors together to make this a little more efficient.
And so to your question of how, public sector, private sector can work together, bring capital in, and I agree. I think getting more capital into our startup ecosystem is really critical. I think a lot of stuff will follow that. I don't know. So we actually had one of our startups funded by a trip to China. Like, we had one of our business development people go with a delegation to China and met a bunch of companies and government officials, and they really wanted to, they're interested in deploying a lot of capital in that space. And at the Institute, we see, close to half a dozen visitors a year from different countries, and, they got connections to sovereign wealth funds, and, there's the cachet of the city and the area, the universities. So I think that plays into some of the common themes we've heard, where we have a lot of great assets here. We really do, but I don't know how well it's branded or how cohesive it comes across. So I think that's something that can happen at a higher level, where you start getting, investments from not just within the U.S., but even outside the U.S. There's a lot of capital, tons of capital, just floating around the world right now, and it just needs to be deployed efficiently. And so I think it's a matter of just, how do you get the attention of these people, these wealth managers? I think a lot of it's branding, it's hosting delegations. I think if you put some type of official seal around it, it gets a lot more interesting too to them. That seems to play well overseas. So, yeah.
What have we not heard today that, in closing, you would like us to think about roles we can play, and how we should think about merging our worlds in a way that is efficient, makes sense, and makes us useful to you? How do we think about that? This is so new to me. I am so fascinated by everything that you're saying. I couldn't talk about any of it, frankly. I'm sure you know that. But this is incredible, and what incredible, remarkable vision of MRT to bring us together and to say we need each other big time. Maybe we need you more than you need us, but certainly there is something there. Help us think about that. Help me. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I would say that, hopefully the sponsorship that the county, the second district in particular, has extended toward us, towards LA Biomed, obviously we're going to do everything we can to make that turn into successes and companies and all that. Hopefully part of what we're doing can be a model of success about what other counties might be able to do. I think that, if we can take lessons from other counties and other spots, I think, as LeWellyn rightly pointed out, this whole environment has changed dramatically over the last 4 or 5 years. I think if counties can react to that and try to model some of the things we're doing here, then, I think it could be successful for other places. But again, with the caveat that was mentioned in the earlier panel, you have to do an inventory of what you really have and then figure out what your strengths are and see if you can then support those.
Yeah, I think I'd echo that. I think certainly a big part of the difference we've seen in Los Angeles has been, the real support that we've had from the county and second district in particular, and also now from the city of Los Angeles, has started to really make public, waves about how important they think the bioscience sector is. I think if there's one kind of take home, obviously because we're here in Los Angeles, that conversation has structured a lot about Los Angeles. But the reason I do what I do, the reason I'm so passionate about bioscience is this is the future of all manufacturing. In 50 years, we're not just going to be talking about bioscience in the context of health and agriculture. Everything that is made will be grown, not dug out of the ground by crude oil. That is the sea change that's going to happen this century. So the counties that,
You mean specifically California or beyond?
Beyond the world. I'm not kidding. It sounds outlandish, but anything that is made from crude oil will not be made from crude oil in 50 years. One, there's not going to be any crude oil. Two, it's completely unsustainable. Crude oil was made by living things. Let's just cut out the 2 billion year middleman there. But this is where we see the future, and we're already starting to see this in the production of materials and fabrics. We're seeing it in the production of more sustainable food. Those of you from agricultural districts, you know that there are a lot of issues with sustainability of traditional farm, or what we call traditional farming practices in the 21st century. There are a lot of innovations going on out there to make food production more sustainable, more healthy. Literally everything that is made can be grown, and that is the big industrial revolution. It's, some people call it the 5th industrial revolution that is coming. And other countries are taking this seriously. They're investing vast amounts of money in these biotech parks. They understand that, in China, a great example is silk. It's a horribly unsustainable practice and requires growing millions and millions of worms that create methane, which is a horrible greenhouse gas, just to make tiny amounts of silk, and there's tons of energy has to go into that, which means burning coal. What if you were a company like Bolt Threads, which is based up in Alameda County, that's worked out how to make spider silk using yeast, so it can be grown in a bioreactor just like in the brewery up the road? And more to the point, who works in a brewery? It's solid, well-paying blue-collar jobs. That is the way the world is going. Whoever takes advantage, just as we did with the last industrial revolution of the information technology revolution, found its home in California, which accounts for much of our leadership right now. Whoever takes control of the bioscience revolution will own the next century. And I believe California has all the things we need to do that, and this is what we should do. So it comes back to this whole idea, knowing what you have. What's in your district? What companies, what manufacturing, what agriculture do you have? And where are the opportunities in that space? Because I can guarantee you there's already someone using life technologies to disrupt that space and make it more sustainable, more energy efficient, and better for us.
When will you announce your bid for public office? Sooner rather than later, I hope.
I only got my citizenship 3 years ago, so I'm not eligible for a lot of things yet.
Okay, well, we're getting closer. Okay, absolutely fascinating, truly fascinating. Thank you. That was really incredible. Closing remarks by you. I'm sorry to shut our panel down short, but we are moving past the end of our time. That's none of our fault, but this is why we got quickly to the essence of your brilliance and how you can help us understand the complexity of your world. So I do want to be efficient in closing out today's incredible opportunity, but final words from you, sir.
Sure, I think we've got all the assets here. It's just a matter of kind of just supporting that ecosystem, packaging it, marketing it properly, and sort of letting certain things take their course, but also, getting the word out and just, I think it'll happen. I think it's inevitable. So it'll be, to Llewellyn's point, it's going to be, one of the most important sectors in the economy.
A round of applause for our panel, please.
And to Supervisor LETICIA PEREZ. So I want to say thank you to all of you for investing part of yesterday for a number of you and today as well in this discussion, and for Llewellyn for allowing us to wrap up with a big rally speech about the inspiration and the great moves that are going to occur related to bioscience and how it's going to impact the economy and our culture going forward. So now we're all charged with the mission of carrying that out back to each of our communities. And I wanted to thank Supervisor Mark Ridley-Thomas for hosting us these past couple of days. It's great to be down in Los Angeles County. Thrilled to be here. And Mr. Supervisor, the last word is yours.
Let's give Graham another big round of applause. The whole team, the whole CSAC team, Matt and company, we thank you for the work in pulling it together. I want to say thank you to my team, both David, as well as Claudia and Fernando, for helping to facilitate some of the content issues and the logistical issues. We appreciate their work. I think the point has already been made how provocative this is, how catalytic this is, and how life-defining it can be. We can lock in on the research, which is fascinating unto itself. The amount of money that moves through this industry is obviously incredible. It is pretty well established that Los Angeles has repositioned itself as the sports mecca of the nation, with 2 NFL teams, 2 NBA teams, multiple soccer teams, Major League Baseball, and a lot of commerce, a lot of activity, a lot of economic activity, a lot of jobs, and I might say living wage jobs, as well as many union jobs that attach to that industry sector. Might I say to you, this bioscience industry dwarfs that in a very, very significant way. And it seems to me that the public sector ought to leverage that for the good of those institutional frameworks, as well as for the individuals in our respective communities that can benefit from that in terms of their own family well-being, as well as the growth of the communities of which they are a part. It has in part been understated. Dr. Meyer did make reference to it, and one of the things that motivates me about this is the end user. I'll just call it the end user, namely the patient. We can count all the money, we can be fascinated by the research, but at the end of the day, he or she who benefits from it will be patients, those sickle cell patients, those cancer patients, those babies that need a launch in life, and more. The end user, the patient. And if there's no other way for the public sector to find its way into this discussion, those of us who are responsible for healthcare institutions, that's our door. This industry can do tremendous amounts for the well-being of our constituents, and I believe that we ought to tap into it for all of it, what it can afford us. So I simply want to say thank you for affording us this opportunity to participate in the conversation, and I hope that we can do a lot with it. Graham, thank you.
Thank you.